Nice to meet you, the guest, please.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hello.
Devi ma'am, shall we start? Ma'am, Ifoma ma'am. Yeah, you have to unmute your mic.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Hello?
We can hear you, ma'am.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Okay, good morning from Nigeria. Yeah, it's a great privilege to be here this morning to speak on the topic redefining theories of communication. These theories of communication, are very vast, vast in nature.
Ma'am, we shall begin it formally, ma'am, with all the welcome address.
What?
Yeah, we shall begin it formally.
Okay, formally.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
So shall we start, sir?
Yes, Asha.
Good evening and good morning, everyone. I, Asha Jennifer, from the Department of English and Other Foreign Languages, take this opportunity to welcome each one of you to the valedictory function of the 3-day international conference on redefining theories of communication, 21st century perspectives in language and literature. This is an immensely exciting evening for our institution. The actively growing participation of professors and research scholars from different colleges affirms the reverence and meaningfulness of the conference. The conference was a synergy of IFEST and the Department of EFL. All in all, it was an excellent event gelled with cerebral grilling and creative palette. I hope you had a meaningful time to showcase your research talents in paper presentation. Let me acknowledge the presence of some of our eminent guests. It is indeed a pleasure to have among us. To give a red carpet welcome to everyone gathered here, may I request the pleasure of inviting Mrs. Casey Mithley, Assistant Professor, Department of EFL, to welcome the gathering.
Good morning, Dr. Ifoma, and a pleasant evening to all. Hope everyone is doing good. With utmost pleasure and pride, I welcome you all to the valedictory session of the 3-day international virtual conference on redefining theories in communication, 21st century perspectives in language and literature. This conference is organized by the Department of English and Other Foreign Languages, College of Science and Humanities, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Ramapuram Campus, Chennai, in association with IFEST, All India Forum for English Students, Scholars and Trainers. It is my esteemed pleasure to welcome the guest of the evening, Dr. Ifoma Ezine Odine, Senior Lecturer, Department of English Language and Literature, Faculty of Arts, Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Awka, Nigeria. Very honored by your presence here with us this evening, ma'am. And I extend my warm welcome to Mr. Abhilash Kaushik, General Secretary, All India Forum for English Students, Scholars and Trainees. Your august presence brightens up the evening, sir. I welcome our Dean, Dr. C. Sundar, SRM IST, who has been a pillar of support in all our endeavors. I would like to welcome our Vice Principal Admin, Dr. J. Dileepan, and Vice Principal Academics, Dr. Ashokan, SRM IST, who have always been guiding us to perfection. Very much pleased by your gracious presences. I put out my hearty welcome to our Professor and Head, Dr. V. Rama, who inspires us to push beyond the boundaries. It renders me great privilege to welcome the dignitaries from IFEST as well. I wholeheartedly welcome the organizing team of the conference, my dear colleagues, students, and friends. I extend my cordial welcome to the academicians, the scholars, the faculty members, and the students from all across the globe. Over the past 2 days, there has been a lot of interactions, learnings, and deliberations on a wide range of topics in both language and literature. Today, we have reached the culmination of the 3-day conference. Do stay connected with us throughout to make it a grand success. Welcome all once again, and thank you.
Thank you, Maithili ma'am. Briefing gives an overall picture of what has happened. To give us the glimpse of the conference, we have Dr. T. Sridevi, Assistant Professor, Department of EFM. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Asha. Honorable Chief Guest of this day, respected Vice Principal Academic Sir, Dynamic General Secretary of IFEST, other dignitaries from IFEST, dear professors, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome and a good afternoon to everyone. The concluding day of this 3-day virtual international conference is indeed a glorious moment in the successful history of College of Science and Humanities, SRMIST, Ramapuram. This success is possible out of the encouragement, support, and motivation given by our management, our heads of the institutions, my HOD ma'am, my dear friends in the department. My special mention goes to our MOU organizing partner, All India Forum for English Students, Scholars, and Teachers for helping and directing us on each and every move for this conference. Language becomes a potential tool for communication and massive literary productions by writers' attempt to build social and cultural relationships reflecting man's experiences, values, and identity. Language feeds the man's basic urge to communicate, analyze, interrupt, and create, whereas literature mirrors the individual's behavior, beliefs, and society. Literature broadens the horizons of people and unfolds the history of the past and the present. Literature ignites the mind through various intellectual deliberations on different perspectives. Both language and literature develop critical thinking and provide broader scope for the development of novel theories and trends. Hence, the objective of this conference is to interconnect language, literature, and research. It aims to explore the best practices of academicians and scholars and exploits the innovative literary perspectives through their research articles. The day one of this conference started with the inaugural session, which was presided over by Dr. C. Sundar, Dean, College of Science and Humanities, SRMIST, and honored with the presence and deliverance of Mr. Abhilaksh Kaushik, General Secretary, IFEST. And the keynote address was given by Dr. Lilia Shmao, Head of the Department of English Language, School of Foreign Languages, while in Kyiv National University, Ukraine. Madam has given the talk on multimodality of communication, category emotions in art discourse, a perspective of fractal semantics. And the session was followed by paper presentation sessions. The day two of this conference started with a plenary talk of Dr. J.A. Khatri, Assistant Professor, School of Liberal Studies and Education, Navachana University, Baroda, on the topic Metaphor, Dialogue, and Communication, some reflections. Sir's talk throws light on the concepts of language, communication, and dialogue, and he demonstrated their interconnectedness and how language and its meaning emerge in the process of communication is also presented with metaphors based on proper nouns. Plenary talk 2 was given by Dr. A.R. Jyotipriya, Assistant Professor, Telangana Social Welfare Degree College, Hyderabad, and the title The Silent and the Articulate, Perspectives in Communication and Technology. Madam's talk focused on representations of the binary opposites of silence and speech across culture, literature, language, and technology, and how all of these affect the communication process. The session sought to emphasize on how culture plays an important role in influencing language and society, in turn unconsciously dividing the society into majority perceived opinion and minority divergent opinion, creating communication barriers through the spiral of silence. Further, Madam has directed how literature to represent the silence of the marginalized and the hegemonic power of the oppressor. Both the sessions were followed by paper presentation sessions. We are really grateful to the participants for their overwhelming contribution for the success of this conference. We have received 240 registrations from India as well as abroad as participants and for presentation too. Among the 244 registrations, 200 members were successfully presented their papers in 16 different paper presentation sessions. We have appointed 16 reputed chairpersons from various prestigious institutions and universities from India as well as abroad. Herewith, I'm concluding my brief note on the conference. Thank you very much for my department for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sridevi ma'am. Now we have Mr. Abhilash Kaushik, General Secretary of IFEST, to give the special address. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It is indeed a pleasure, and yeah, did not say that again and again. And first of all, I would like to say that it's been an amazing journey, and those 3 days which we have had till now have really been an eye-opener, in the sense that these 3 days have, in a way, opened up wide deliberations at the very outset, if not more. But then, along with deliberations, along with negotiations, along with scholarly talks, we have also had engagement. And this is really important in terms of how we intend to do, and in terms of how we really make us aware of the things which are happening, because the main focus of this very conference has been on communication, has been on the intricacies of how communication can take place, and also has been taking place across various lands and borders. And our plenary talks, our sessions, our different papers have also, in a way, made us realize how communication has become really indispensable in terms of our living, in terms of our society, and also in terms of our connections according to the needs, according to the ways, and also according to how human beings tend to abide by the norms and intricacies of a society. And then, remarkably enough, the conference has also made us aware of the different interlinkings, the different connections, which I focused on during my first talk. Because whenever I talk about connection, or whenever I refer to the word connection, what I really mean is the interconnectedness of various attributes, the interconnectedness of literature, of research as such, of the intricacies of linguistics as well. And the different papers which we have had in these 3 days have, in a way, made us realize that at the end of the day, these are the very connections, these are the very attributes which will help us grow, if not more, which will help us understand how the subtle nuances of both literature and also linguistics have been really vital in terms of understanding and also comprehending the attributes. And we'll have some kind of even more greater discussions. And in the days to come, I really believe that these platforms, or these kind of organizations and interviews of these conferences, will also enable us the understanding of the nuances of these kind of understandings, because at the end of the day, we all abide by the norms, we all abide by what we intend to do, and also we have our set platforms, and also we have our set understandings. And I'm sure our guest for the day will throw more light on these ideas. And I would like to conclude by saying that this conference has really made us understand the ramifications of communication, if not anything else, and also how the participants have been able to share their own knowledge, share their own ideas, and also share their own viewpoints in terms of drawing the links between literature, linguistics, and also research. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. A well-known person in the field of academics for his dedication and selfless work. He is an expert in the field of career development. He has presided over many international and national conferences, participated in board of studies and various educational activities. Dear participants, I take this opportunity as a delight in welcoming Dr. N. Ashokan, Vice Principal Academics, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Ramapuram, Chennai, to deliver the presidential address. Welcome you, sir.
Very good evening, one and all present here. The most respected guest for the validity function, Dr. Ifuma, Mr. Abhishek Kaushik, beloved Dean, College of Science and Humanities, respected HOD, English and Foreign Language Department, Dr. Rema, my dear faculties and valuable participants, very good evening once again. My deep appreciation to Dr. Sridevi and Dr. Emmanuel for organizing this 3-day international conference on redefining theories of communication, 21st century perspectives in language and literature, in association with All India Forum for English students, scholars, and trainers. My congratulations to all the coordinators of this conference. I would like to speak upon 3 topics. First one is this fourth person point of view in storytelling. And second topic is how one message, victory or we win, are converted into history even today. And third one is how a trend, an idea, or message, or technological innovations turns into an epidemic, including rumors. First point of view in book writing or storytelling or making movies or even delivering our syllabus content to the students is a perspective from which a story is told. Points of view are literary terms that refers to the person who tells a story. The narrator usually tells a story from first person, second person, or third person point of view, which describes a character's perspective from which a story is told. Why point of view is important? Many aspirant novelists or beginner teachers or even storytellers spends the majority of their time crafting the perfect setting or preparing the syllabus, preparing the contest, characters and plot line, giving little attention or none at all to the storytelling aspect, and that can be a problem. Here are several compelling reasons why point of view is important and why you should not disregard it. I listed out. The first one is it sets the characters apart. So very clarity is given on that. You are able to show, not tell, the details of your story, your book, your content, whatever it may be you want to communicate. Readers are able to understand the thought process and perspectives of the protagonist and characters. It point of view creates the flow of the information you want the readers to know and experience throughout this book, throughout the story, throughout the communication, whatever you want to have on it. Second person's point of view is very uncommon. The narrator is usually an unspoken me talking to spoken you. This is a strange point of view and is very rarely used in literature. 2 books named, for example, Bright Lights and Big City by J. McNerney is probably the most famous example for the second point of view telling the stories. However, the blog spots and self-help books are often written in the second person's point of view. And J.K. Rowling wrote the Harry Potter series using a third person limited point of view, wherein The narrator is not part of the story, but focus on Harry Potter's perspective. On the other hand, Susan Collins and another book, The Hunger Game, the first book, is a first-person point of view narrative, wherein Collins gives one of the characters that Katniss Everdeen the power to tell the stories. And this is the fourth point of the person point of view is very, very rare. This is a new recent development in modern storytelling concept. It uses the pronouns like one, someone, somebody, anyone, anybody, oneself, once. These kind of pronouns is used when you want to communicate your stories or message communications in the fourth point of view, person's point of view. So the main advantages of speaking in the fourth person point of view is either refer to something that many people do. For example, one hand may slip if the tube were lubricated, or to avoid the passive voice. For example, someone can do this instead of this can be done. So inconsistent point of view is one of the top things a professional editor has to be proofread, edit, read it, and correct it. So you have got an idea, ironclad, impenetrable storylines, well-rounded characters, and the right setting, but who will be telling the story that matters a lot? This is where the point of view comes in. Do you let one character take the wheel of storytelling, or use the fourth person point of view narratives? Teachers are basically two storytellers, while point of view teachers select that deliver their syllabus content matters a lot to create a long-lasting impact among the students and facilitate the constructive and meaningful learning of that. This is the first part of it. A second topic I would like to say that how one message, victory or we win, converted into history. To take about this marathon race. The event was born out of the legend of the Athenian courier, day runner, professional running courier, day-long runner, Pheidippides. The spirit of Pheidippides is the central figure of the story that inspired a modern sporting event, the marathon race. Pheidippides is said to have run from Marathon to Athens to deliver news of the victory of the Battle of Marathon before promptly collapsing and dying out. Right? So, what is the spirit of teachers to inspire their students? That matters a lot. So, my last topic would like to say that when a trend or idea or message or technological innovation turns into an epidemic, how subsequently this trend, an idea, message, or technological innovations, or what are the communications you want to spread among the large number of people, spreads like a wildfire. There are four kinds of people you need are involved in turning this message, any communication you want to make it as the into epidemic. The first one is the translator kind of people. They spread innovative ideas and products to a broad audience based on them having specific social circles and being renowned for having reputable information. These people are called the translators, the first level people. And second level people called the connectors. Connectors instigate the rapid spread of ideas. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book, The Tipping Point, describes the connectors as people with a vast social network. This vast social network allows connectors to spread ideas to a vast amount of people in a very, very short period. Importantly, connectors are often well connected in many different forums, areas, social networks. Connectors know how to effectively communicate with lots of different people and finally enjoy the process of doing it. That matters a lot. They enjoy the process of doing the process. Third type of people, we call it as the mavens. Mavens obtains information and pass it on. Mavens are knowledgeable about multiple topics. Therefore, they are always gaining new information from different sources and different areas, different topics, and making link between this information with their existing knowledge. And mavens are trusted by those around them as they are individuals with their insider knowledge. Therefore, their friends and family follow their recommendations. Generally, mavens are willing to recommend any product, any message or service. They are confident about that. So this part I told in third person point of view as mavens. And finally, Fourth kind of people is the salesmen. Some people are by nature or by birth, they are natural salesmen. Their greatest strength is their understanding on non-verbal communications. This non-verbal communication creates a rhythm in the conversation that establishes a sense of trust and intimacy. Salesmen know how to synchronize themselves with others. Salesmen express their emotions so clearly that they are contagious. Salesmen are in a strong position to influence people and spread ideas. I don't mean people are selling the product to salesmen. I mean salesmen mean they are able to communicate, able to connect emotionally to any kind of people not related to selling any product. Right? I don't mean those salesmen. A few people are enough to ignite an epidemic. There are exceptional people out there who are capable of starting epidemics. All you have to do is to find out them if you want to communicate effectively, if you want to communicate your message to the large group of people in the society. Okay. So not all ideas are will spread. You have to take care of it. So ideas have to spark interest only, uh, those information ideas only they spread about it. So ideas has to spark interest, otherwise it won't spread like wildfire. So for this example, which ideas has to be sparked? Normally the rumors. When you want to communicate the right information, it doesn't have any spark. It doesn't create any spark among the people, any kind of interest on it. Whereas rumors do that. So the sociologist Gordon Allport describes this as being a three-step process of distortion as far as the rumors is concerned. The first step is the teller of the rumors omits specific details to increase interest and let others fill in the gaps. The rumors are made more interesting when the remaining details are suddenly made for more specific, so that it creates more impact and interest. Finally, the third process is these rumors are adopted into society when the population start talking about this rumor in their everyday conversations. So if you say these kind of, if you able to follow these three kind of informations, you make it as instead of sending the wrong information, the rumors, if you take it as these three steps as your advantage to make whatever the communication you want to spread among the society, you can able to do definitely on that. So let me conclude. Which point of view will you choose to tell about your stories? Do you want to communicate among the large group of people inside the classroom or in the society? And what is your spirit in making the long-lasting impact? Do you have the spirit in every activity you do, every message you are attached with that, or every message you want to communicate among a large group of people? So without the spirit, it won't spread that. Identify the four kinds of people to ignite an epidemic. It's very difficult, but you have to identify who are those people. This the translators, connectors, mavens, and salesmen. If you identify these four type of people, definitely you can make your ideas and communications to ignite an epidemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insights and the thoughts on the stories. I request the participants to turn on the videos for the virtual photograph to be taken. I request the participants to turn on your videos. Participants, kindly turn on your videos.
Participants, you are requested to turn on your videos, please. Shall I proceed, Asha?
Yes, ma'am. Tilaga ma'am, is it over?
Yeah, one more, ma'am. The 4th page. Yeah, it's over, Asha.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, participants. It's so beautiful to see you all virtually. The best is yet to come. To introduce our chief guest of the 3-day international conference, we have Mrs. D. Tilagavadi, Assistant Professor, Department of English and Other Foreign Languages, to introduce the chief guest to the gathering. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Asha. Good evening. The success and reputation of any occasion is significantly defined with its primary dignitaries. Hence, this 3-day international conference too has become a successful endeavor with its eminent speakers. To make it well for today's valedictory session, we have our esteemed guest, Dr. Ifoma Ezine Odine, Senior Lecturer from Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Awka. Dr. Ifoma completed her BA in 2006, MA Chinese Philosophy in 2012, MA English Language and Literature in 2012, and her PhD in 2019. Presently, Dr. Ifoma is working as a senior lecturer at Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Awka, and has been since 2008. As an academician, Dr. Ifoma's contribution extends with book publications, publication of articles in various reputed journals, with book chapters, and with her role in conferences, workshops, and symposia. Dr. Ifoma has been the editor of International Journal of African Studies, Students' Departmental Journal, Awka Journal of English Language and Literary Studies, Use of English Textbook, and Journal of Chinese and African Studies. Ma'am has administrative experience too with respect to various roles, has been a member of different professional bodies too, and has won awards right from her school days. Thus, it's our pride to have Dr. Ifoma Ezine Odine as our guest speaker for today's session. We welcome you, ma'am. Dr. Ifoma, ma'am, you have to unmute your audio. Ma'am, Ifoma, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I really want to thank you for this great opportunity of presenting my own contribution to your major scope of presentation in this conference. One thing we have to understand is that theories of communication, are nature. Theory of communication theory, we actually have it is a social discipline that explores the content, characteristics, channels through which communication is
Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Audio is not clear, ma'am. Voice is breaking.
Okay.
Audio is not clear. Sorry, ma'am.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Not okay. Okay.
Please continue, ma'am. Yeah, okay, ma'am. We can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay. So when we talk about theory of communication, it becomes important to know that it is a social discipline that explores the content, characteristics, and channels through which communication is given. Now, when we talk about theory of communication, there are diversified things that have to be taken into consideration. We look at discourse and pragmatic analysis. We look at language and literature. We look at information and communication structure. We also look at organizing in terms of theory of publicity and public relations. We look at semiotics of communication advertising under advertising. Then we also look at audiovisual mass communication.
I'm sorry for the interruption. Still having the same problem. Not audible as well. Not audio is not clear, ma'am. If earphone is used, it will be okay, I believe.
It's okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, ma'am, but breaking in voice also happening.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I have to use my voice.
Some unnecessary voice along with your voice, ma'am. Sorry, a noise, some disturbance is there in the audio.
Okay. Is it okay now? Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me now? Is it clear?
Sorry, ma'am, it's not it.
Is it audible?
Ma'am, there is a noise which is overlapping your
There is
audio.
a noise, yes, ma'am, along with your own, with your voice. There is a disturbing noise.
Okay. Is it okay now?
Connecting to two devices, sir. Ask them to connect only one device. Sir.
Okay. Is it okay
You
now?
can try using earphones, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. I think I need to get my earphone.
Yes, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Sure.
Okay. 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 Hello?
Yeah, so clear, ma'am. So clear, ma'am, now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Is it okay now?
Yes, ma'am. Very fine, ma'am. We can hear you
Okay.
clearly. Yes, fine, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you can hear me clearly. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry for.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry
Glad
for
for
that.
your cooperation, ma'am.
Okay. 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 I'm deeply sorry for this um, kind of distraction. Yeah. I'm going to talk about literary perspectives of communication theory, looking at major prospects in the 21st century. But before I do that, it becomes important that we know that that communication theory is a social discipline that explores contents, characteristics, and channels through which communication is given. Now, when we have to understand that the main contribution of theories of communication is the relationship it has with daily life and experiences, especially in the extension of knowledge for social development and interaction within a given cultural community. Before I delve into the aspects of literary perspectives of communication theories, it becomes important to state what Robert T. Craig stated. In his own voice, he said, I take a pragmatic view of theory. This is to say that there is no one correct theory of communication, but many theories are useful for thinking about a specific problem, or rather, thinking about specific problems. The more theories you know, the more different problem-solving options you have. So on this note, it becomes important to know that in academic scholarship, we must outline what I call the basic elements of inquiry into our topic of discussion. This inquiry comes in the form of questions. When we have questions about a given theory, we must be able to observe that theory and then offer our own observation in relation to literature. In humanistic scholarship, literature and theories are associated with what I call subjectivity. That is looking at creative interpretation of a given literary text. And the main aim of this subjectivity is to understand individual subject response and value of a given work of art. And this is to say, from Stephen perspectives, this is to say that communication involves understanding how people behave in creating, exchanging, and interpreting messages. Now, before we delve into communication theory, we need to understand what pure communication is all about. First of all, we say that communication is not done in the solitude or in the solitude of one's privacy, because it is at the periphery of social activities. In its function, it is also important to say that communication works pari passu with a given social or cultural context. And that is where literature plays an important role. We say that literature is a mirror held up to nature. When we talk about a mirror held up to nature, our interpretation of literature simply means that literature replicates reality. And that is what communication does. There is communication in duplication. There is communication in reality in terms of how we relate to one another, because no one is an island. We need to communicate for the social development of a given society. This basic point has validity because a social or cultural context is made up of individuals that must share a common language, tradition, law, and etiquette. Therefore, since these individuals share a given space, their goal must be meted in communication for the good of society. To further create an identity on this discussion, it would be interesting to state that without communication, there is no community. In essence, without community, there is no communication. The global intellectual elite, especially the sensitive ones, sensitive among them, know that the law of universality applies to the term communication. On the basis of this universal law of communication, we can say that communication theory highlights a concrete view that both human beings and other organisms have basic properties, associated with imparting and transmitting information or knowledge to others within and outside their worlds. A major concern for meaningful communication establishes the fact that any form of expression should make sense, whether it is an incorporeal quantity or any substance that impacts a significant motion. Now, it is important just to define communication as a process by which living things transmit ideas. Ideas could be thoughts, opinions, it could be feelings, it could be a social problem in form of information. The most important thing is that there are essential ideologies relevant, to the major concerns of a given social group. Haven't had a focus, a foretaste of various subject works in terms of the semiotic word, in terms of human beings or living organism. It's also very important that we add a 21st century subject category, which is referred to as cybernetics. That is technology related to computers and internet devices. And that is why we say the word is very global. And then because of this global nature, we can say that literature can be cybernetically harnessed. I'm going to talk about that when we talk about the traditions of communication theory. Now, in communication theory, there are basic concepts that we need to understand. And that is why we say that basically communication theory operates within some frameworks. That is, these frameworks are seen as support structures. So for communication theory to operate, there must be what I call structured arrangements. Structured arrangement is very important depending on the discipline, irrespective of the discipline that is being explored or explicated. So when we talk about structured arrangement, it was within the framework of communication theory. We have the sender of a given message, who is a source. So when we talk about the sender, from literature or literary perspectives or literary studies, we say the sender is the author. The sender is a source who transmits an idea or information or experiences to the receiver. From literary perspective, we say the receiver is the literary in terms of the reader of a given text. When we talk of text, we can have plain text. Yeah. Then the e-copies could be related to what I call the cybernetic purview of literature. It could be visual, it could be put into signs and all the rest and quotes. Now, it becomes important that the author, who is the source, transmits an idea through a given medium. The medium could be oral, it could be written, it could be visual, or through cyberspace. Now, within a given social cultural context. That is to say, an information which could be embedded on a plain text, as seen in literature or in the cyberspace, as seen in ways like online, now could be communicated, but this should be about a social context, about a given cultural meaning. Now, when this is done, something happens. In the process of communication, the sender, that who is the author, is what we call basic knowledge about a given social behavior. That is seen in the character or in the characters depicted in the novel. A short story, it could be a poem, yeah, it also could be plays. Now, he or she, as the author of a given text, exhibits unique skills. And when we talk of skills, we talk about the stylistic aspect of communication. Now, he or she, as an author, also is a base what we call attitudes that encode a given idea. Idea could come in form of experiences, varied experiences of life in a given cultural meaning. Now, and this is a source, and it transforms these experiences into another form of representation, as seen in literary text, where there is an encoded representation of characters into symbols, or what we call familiar entities. Further action is taken by the receiver who decodes and tries to interpret silent issues visible in the message that have been transferred. Basically, in literary studies, we try to uphold the view that a given message must depict a subject matter, listed fictional elements, plots, theme, character and characterization, point of view, a setting and language, which could occur different channels, which could be accessed through different channels. Now, central to the structured arrangement, as I said, visible in the communication theory, is the design of communication. So when we talk about the structure of arrangement, we also talk about the design of communication within literary text. Basically, I look at three basic designs in the structure of when we want to structure a kind of communication, I look at what we call sequential design. Sequential design, this is seen in the plot structure. The design simply means that the information or the message or the arrangement of story of a given story follows a chronological flow by maintaining a single destination flow. This is possible in the plot section, in the plots, in terms as one of the elements of fiction. Now, this is under sequential design. Then we look at what we call conversational design, whereby ideas flow between individuals, eliciting varied interpretations. So within a given plot, within a given story, that is also from literary perspective, there is what we call conversation. See, in the narrative skills depicted by the literary artist, we see conversation between characters within a given work. Now, that is why we have message, feedback, and message. Now, I have another design I call the conventional design. The conventional design is very wide, it's very complex, in the sense that ideas are encoded and decoded concurrently through different channels for modification and agreement. This has to do with the level of criticism, because it doesn't have to do with the characters themselves within the context. It also has to do with the external readers. And I usually make an emphatic statement that it is the prerogative of a writer as a literary artist, that is, as an author, a playwright, or a poet, to actually depict his ideas, his opinions, or experiences from his own perspective. But once that is done, he relegates the next level of duty to the literary critics. And readers are basically critics. So the readers go into the wider form of trying to understand what a given work is. That is why it falls within the conventional design of communication. Then, under this framework, communication theory works under the framework of psychology. You cannot actually talk about communication with living things like human beings without talking about psychology. It is very important because psychology has to do with the psyche of both the author and the readers and other people in a given social context. So when we talk about psychology, we say that communication is discussed within varying degrees of intensity in the study of human mind as it relates to the mental, emotional, and behavioral characteristics of different individuals. Central to this study is the psyche of both the sender, who is the author, and the receiver, who is the reader or the critic. In doing this, we look at patterns of attitude in the processing and the depiction of knowledge or information by the sender is inevitably taken into cognizance. The psyche, the attitude of writing, the projection in terms of using language, in terms of, because literature cannot be appreciated without language. That is why we say that literature and language work pari passu, because we simply say that language or words are tools by which a literary artist actually depicts experiences. So we can assess the word of the author through language, embedded in signs, embedded in symbols. So these are very important. That's why we talk about the semantic, the syntactic effects, talk about the semantic effect and then the pragmatic effect that has to come with the behavior, that the response of what has been written on the critics or the readers. So that is about psychology. So communication theory must be assessed within the framework of psychology. Now we look at another framework in the form of social or cultural context. We say that literature does not exist in a vacuum. There is always an existing society that literature wants to depict. And I still maintain that without literature, there is no society. And without society, there is no literature. In essence, they work together for the unity, for the progress, for the acceptance of a given cultural milieu. So communication is a process that involves exchange of ideas between individuals in a given culture or society. Therefore, a given context creates an atmosphere that allows information to thrive. That is to say that the content of the message is as important as its treatment within the framework of communication. And when we communicate, we have to express what exists within a given society. And that is why social problems are there, because they are peculiar and unique to that society. Now we look at the fourth framework, which says criticism. Communication must thrive under criticism. Without criticism, there will be no correction, there will be no perfection, there will be no change, positive change in society. That's why a literary work is subjected to correction. And that is why communication communication theory is applied in diverse disciplines in order to enhance academic scholarship, whether it is a scientific scholarship or a humanistic scholarship. So in criticism, we say that criticism defines, classifies, explicates, and evaluates information or messages within a literary source. Now, readers who are also literary critics, due to good maybe exposure, freedom of expression, are currently appreciating literary works by offering different interpretation using literary theories. So when we talk of literary theories, we're going to see how literary theories actually help us in understanding what I call the traditions, of communication theory. So when we talk about expression of freedom in terms of trying to judge or to express your opinion or interpret a given work from your own perspective of view, it becomes important that these interpretations could result in what I call context-based approaches. So when I talk about context-based approaches, I look at what I call psychological context. Psychological context is very important because human mind, human's psyche could be very fragile. So when we talk about psychological context, we look at psychological criticism. Then I have another context which I call gender context. Gender plays a very significant role, in many societies, in Nigeria, in Africa, in Asia, in many continents. It plays a very vital role. So when we talk about gender context, which is very unique to different, cultural milieux, then we look at feminist, lesbian, gay criticisms. There are works, literary works written on them. Then when we talk about, I also have another context which is called the historical context. Every given society has a historical purview that has been documented in literary studies or in literary pieces. Now, from historical context, we can venture into approaches like new historicism, cultural materialism. Then we have another context, which is called the colonial contest. In colonial context, we try to look at colonialism, looking at from literary studies, we look at colonial experiences. These are historical, experiences that for those who have been colonized. So in literature helps to reenact these experiences. So from colonial context, we also go into post or new colonial criticism. Now, we also have another context, which is socio-economic context. This is very important. So when we talk about socio-economic context, this is where we look at Marxism of different variants. And then we move to what we call socio-cultural context. That is to say, there is no homogeneous society. All societies have distinct cultures, distinct traditions. So we look at, from the socio-cultural context, we look at myth criticism. We look at dialogism. Then we look at myth in association in the picture of a given society. This is all about the context in which communication theory could thrive. Now, we cannot talk about communication theory without looking at what we call literary communication. This is very important in understanding the perspective, literary perspectives of theories of communication. So what is literary communication? We say that once there is a transmission of ideas, opinions, or experiences in a written or spoken form between an author or a reader, this is called literary communication. Now, literary communication recognizes the interaction of the reader with the author as a creative response that transmits a given message according to the unique circumstances, characteristics of the reader as well as the sender. Now, one thing is very important. The sender, who is the author, might come from a different cultural group, while the reader could also come from a different cultural group. So the most important thing is communication skills are very paramount, very important. There should be clarity in the fiction. And then in looking at literary communication, there are basic factors that should be taken into consideration. Now, we look at the social factor, we look at cultural factor, we look at emotional circumstances. And then factors such as age, gender could also play a kind of good part in interpretation of these messages that come in form of experiences. Remember, it is through reading a given novel or through reading a given literary piece that we as the readers, are exposed to the complexity of human experiences. That is why we say that a person who travels widely, acquires wisdom. This is what literature does to us. So in reading widely, something happens. We look at the basic functions that literature performs. In reading literary pieces, we get entertained. That's why we say that literature entertains. That's why we say the primary basis of literature is to entertain you. Now, from being entertained in reading novels, you move to the second function of literature, which is literature educates you. So by reading varied experiences of life depicted by the sender, who is the author, we tend to be enlightened. We tend to be educated on different cultural aspects, on different identity level, on different experiences that we do not have opportunity of experiencing in reality. That is why literature is very powerful. Now, from being educated, we move to the third basic function of literature. Literature corrects. It is through this subjective or creative out of response that we try to see how literature corrects our behavior, how literature builds our psyche or changes our psyche from negative to positive. And that is not to say that literature cannot affect your psyche negatively. There are different aspects. It depends on the cognitive response of the reader, who is also an interpreter and a critic. Now, it is very important for us to understand the basic, origin of literary communication. Before 1930s, we look at exploring the genres of literature by readers, and that is to say that readers were only meant to read a text and discover just a simple meaning of a given text in terms of the major subject matter, or what I call the message or the thematic preoccupation of the word in a given literary text. But after 1960s, we look at the point of Rosenblatt, the discovery of a subjective reader response, which projected a newer outlook of interpretation. Now, we have readers could enjoy and actually engage in what I call valid meanings, expressing valid opinions or interpretation, having their own personal, way of interacting with the author or way of interpreting a given message written by the author. Now, This is why in the subjective response, visible in exploring a given literary text through analysis, in the 21st century, we are able to look at what we call new types, of text, which is not viewed from a single purview of exploring just the major thematic factor. Now we have a multicultural text having different individuals in terms of gender, in terms of sex. So we are able to see different literary texts that projected multicultural context in terms of character experiences. Yeah, so we're able to read through people's culture and understand what these people experience and how the cultural traditions or some of the anachronistic tendencies, that are inherent within a social-cultural tradition, a social-cultural society. Now, we go to what we call communication theory. But we cannot talk about communication theory without evaluating cultural communication theory. So in evaluating cultural communication, in evaluating communication theories, it is important to note that there are criteria that will assist you or us to systematically, evaluate the theories that we want to choose for interpreting a given literary text, a given novel. And remember, just like Robert Craig said, remember that there is no one correct theory of communication, but many theories are useful for thinking about specific problems. And that is to say, the more theories of communication we are able to understand, the more we are able to solve different complex problems in different ways. Now, in evaluating communication theory, we have to look at some criteria. Number one criteria, we look at appropriateness. How appropriate is a theory that we've chosen? How appropriate it is to that text you've chosen to analyze or explicate. So when we talk of appropriateness, we ask the theories, epistemological, ontological, axiological assumptions appropriate for the theoretical questions addressed within that given literary text you are trying to explicate. This question, we also have to ask, are these theories of communication appropriate to predict behavior on the basis of experience that have been depicted? You also need to answer this question before you use a theory by saying, is there a logical consistency between the theory and its assumptions as explicated, as seen in the literary text? And that is to say that in literature, there is no casual depiction of action. It is not appropriate if experiences are depicted actually without some basic features of cognitive or cultural perspectives. It simply means that for a literary theory to be used in explication in a given work, it must be imbued with what we call plausibility, laced with authors' artistic uniqueness and visible elements of fiction, such as good law, structure, subject matter, setting, appropriate diction in terms of point of view, character, and characterization. And that is why when we talk about socio-psychological tradition, we'll understand there are different theories of communication that are very important in explicating literary works. When we talk of threat theory, cognitive theory, when we talk of communication theory of identity, when we talk of identity negotiation theory. So now, within a given work, you must be able to see the features of these, to see how appropriate a particular theory of communication is to a given text. And this is very important in looking at works that have traumatic experiences. And that is why in looking at threat theory or cognitive theory, how varied complexity of cultural experiences as depicted in a text affect the behavior of the characters, as well as the behavior of those who read those works in reality. Now, we look at a second criteria. So second criterion, it says we look at the heuristic value of a given theory. So when we talk about heuristic value, we simply ask this question: does the theory generate new ideas for research? Definitely, a given research must actually be able to contribute something new to existing scholarship. That's why you see writers, you see researchers trying to delve into different aspects of communication. So from the purview, you should be able to understand from literary what are the perspectives or the new aspects you want to bring into academic readership. So when you ask yourself, does the theory generate new ideas for research? Does it have heuristic value? In a sense, practical theories are humanistic because they produce new ideas by exploring new situations. So we move to the third criterion, which said validity. Before you use a given theory of communication, it becomes important that you ask yourself, the true value of a given theory. The work of art is appreciated once it displays a variety of truth in experience. That's why we say that a true work of art is one that is possible. It has relationship. It has a reflection of reality. So it should be in choosing a communication theory, you should be able to bring out the possibility of a given text. This is what, when we talk about validity, we talk about the value and what, or importance or utility of a theory in respect to a given literary text. Then the validity must have what we call correspondence. That's to say, the concepts or relations specified by the theory must be observed within a given literary text. It's very important. So when you talk about behavior, the threats, when we talk about threat theory, you find that different characters have different behavior and different types of behavior in terms of the way they react to situations or experiences that could lead to trauma or that could cause neuroses. So if you are talking about traumatic novels, example, you need to explicate the theory of the trauma theory by Catherine Carrot in line with the communication theory. Now you see, are there some cognitive behavior in terms of response or patterns of thoughts of the individual? Very important. Then we look at the fourth criterion, which is parsimony. Parsimony, you actually have to define if a theory should have logical simplicity. This is very important. It must have a simple logical explanation about a given action or behavior of characters in a given text. Now, in trying to choose a communication theory, you also have to look at openness. A given theory has to be open to a given literary text for accessibility. That is to say that theories are judged based on their openness. Openness involves dialogue with other perspectives. It acknowledges, its own incompleteness. And that is to say that no one theory is good. It must give room for further interpretation. And that is why literary critics actually try to appreciate a work and then give people suggestions on how to tackle varied experiences of people using communication theory and using other theories or approaches. Now, we have looked at different criteria for choosing theories of communication. Now we have to look at what I call traditions of communication theory. So there are many traditions of communication theory, but I'm going to go with traditions stipulated by Robert Craig in his text, communication, theories of communication. Now, we have 7, it could also be more, but I'm going to deliberate on 7, traditions of communication theory. We have the semiotic tradition. We have the phenomenological tradition. We have the cybernetic tradition. We have the socio-psychological tradition. We have the socio-cultural tradition. We have the critical tradition, and then we have the rhetorical tradition. In literature, we must note that theory is used to understand various approaches or traditions that have influenced, knowledge of communication. Therefore, we need to have what we call a holistic view that offers good interpretation of literary experiences. And this holistic view is seen in the traditions of communication theories. Now, when we talk of semiotic tradition, we look at how we can say that objects are indeed symbols for literary representation. Semiotics, or the study of sign, forms an important tradition of thought in communication theory. It simply depicts about how signs represents objects, ideas, situation, feelings, and condition outside of themselves. And that is why we say that literature is very vast. It has different stylistic and ornamental features that are very symbolic. Inasmuch as we use words, signs to decode, or symbols to decode existing entities, it becomes important that we align our interpretation within the semiotic views of what have been depicted. So we look at sign in relation as a referent to something in reality. We also look at symbols, within a given literary text as being arbitrary. Now, meanings, it's important to know that meanings, or meaning arises from relationship or relationships amongst three basic features. We have what we call the object, object referred to as a reference. We have the person, who is called the interpreter, that is the position of the reader. We also have the sign, which could also be called a reference, depending on interpretation that had been given. And that is to say, in the mind of the interpreter, who is the reader, the sign could also represent the object that is being spoken about. Now, in looking at semiotic tradition, there are 3 basic areas of study that must be taken into cognizance. We look at semantics, we look at syntactics, we look at pragmatics. So remember, when we talk of semiotics, it depicts what signs stand for. And we know signs are also part of the picture of experience in a given text. Signs imagines sign imagines, or semiotics actually imagines 2 words, a world of things and a world of signs, and brings the relationship between these worlds. This is what semiotic does. So in looking at the 3 areas of semiotics, when we talk of semantics, we should be able to ask, what does a sign represent? We are in the realm of semiotics, therefore we should be able to understand what signs represent. That we should be able to ask this pertinent question: what meaning does a sign bring to the mind of a person within a given cultural context or situation. This is what the semantic area of study within semiotics as a tradition of communication theory, represents. Now we look at a second area of study under semiotics. We look at the syntactics. The syntactics has to do with the study of relationships among signs. It refers to the rules by which people combine signs into complex systems of meanings. In essence, human beings use infinite combination of signs to express what I call a wealth of meanings. Signs are understood in relation to other signs. That is why words, language, gestures help us in interpreting a given expression. Now we move to the third area under semiotics. We look at pragmatics. So when we talk of pragmatics, we talk about how signs impact on social life. So when we talk of how impact, it has to do with behavioral responses of individuals as a result of what have been depicted. How does a given work affect the reader's psyche? Very important. So that is why we say sign and sign systems are perceived as tools with which people communicate. So we must actually interpret signs in relation to the society, in relation to ourselves, how our psyche are actually manipulated. Therefore, in literature, visual meanings are also affected by learning. So when we talk about visual meanings, we also come in contact with the cybernetic aspect of literature. From online sources, we can actually see that visual meanings are very important because they also affect our psyche, whether they make use of code, sign, or other forms of symbols that could communicate positively or negatively. Now, we look at the second tradition of communication theory. We look at what we call the phenomenological tradition. In phenomenological tradition, we simply say that it assumes that people actively interpret their experiences and understand the world by their personal experiences. That is to say that most people or general people understand the reality of the world or the reality of a given depicted work from their own perspective based on their own personal experiences. That is why they discourse and interpret a given work in line with their experiences. That is why it's very important that we know that knowledge of individual experiences are found or directly in our unconscious or rather conscious experiences. That's why we say that literature affects. Yeah, it affects. But its effect must be felt first within an individual. Then the individual has to match his or her own experiences with the ones that have been depicted. This is where the possibility of a given literary work comes to play. And when we talk of possibility, it simply means that literature has to play out real life experiences using fictional characters or rather fictional settings. Therefore, in talking about the phenomenological tradition, we have to understand that the meaning of a thing consists of the potential of that thing in one's life. That's to say, in an individual's life. Then in looking at this phenomenological tradition, we also have to understand that language is the vehicle of meaning. In the world, literature is explored through language. You cannot talk about literature without using language. Language must be used, whether it is oral language or written language. Now, we move into what we call the cybernetic tradition. In cybernetic tradition, which is a trend, a theory that is very visibly connected to the 21st century, explication of the literary world. It said that when we talk about, from the perspective of communication theory, when we talk about cybernetic tradition, we can say it is a very complex. The tradition has very complex systems in which many interacting elements or influence one another. In looking at cybernetic tradition, we simply have to understand that it explains how physical, biological, social, and behavioral processes work. This is used to achieve what we call balance and change in society. It is also used in understanding the instances of communication occurring in our everyday life. That is why we are, through online, we're able to assess the varied complexity of human experiences, both in coded language, symbols, signs, and even in audio-visual forms that we can actually have access to. Now we move into another tradition of communication theory, which is the socio-physiological tradition. It is a study of individual as a social being. It focuses on individual social behavior, looking at psychological variables, individual effects, personalities, and personality traits, in terms of perception and cognition. So when we talk about psychological tradition, we have to look into what I call certain concepts: the behavioral, the cognitive, and the biological. So when we talk about behavioral, it has to do with how people behave in communication situations. It establishes the relationship between communication behavior, what you say, and then what you do. You see, from the perspective of literary studies, what a writer, what an author says goes a long way, or depicts, goes a long way in affecting the psyche or the behavior of the readers. Now we look at what we call the cognitive perspective. When we talk about cognitive perspective in relation to cognitive theory, we look at patterns of thoughts, how individuals process and acquire, store, or process information in a way that leads to behavioral outputs. So literature performs the function of entertaining us. From us being entertained, it educates us. From being educated, we become recipients of some cultural aspects or some social aspects that might change our behavior for good or for bad. That's why in the vision of some experiences, we get to understand some situation leading to traumatic experiences, and the way we see these characters when we see them being manipulated, we also try to understand the reality of our own experiences. Then we also look at the socio-psychological tradition from looking at the biological aspect. That is to say that our traits, patterns of thinking and behavior, could actually help an individual in discussing experiences. So whether we belong to a male gender, female gender, or the other gender, it also helps us in interpreting different behavioral experiences. Now we move to another tradition, which is the socio-cultural tradition. So when we talk about socio-cultural, the literature does not exist in a vacuum. There is an existing society, definitely. Literature is all about a given society. It is all about depicting the problems or social problems that exist in that society. Therefore, when we talk about socio-cultural tradition, you simply say that it emphasizes what we call social interaction within a given text, within a given cultural meaning. It talks about how people interact in society. And we cannot have valid experiences without interacting first with ourselves. This is what we call inherent interaction. And then secondly, with the society. This is what we call both conversational, interaction. This is why we have experiences. We're able to tell our stories. We're able to tell how we feel about some anachronistic tendencies, about some cultural identifications that actually negatively affect our psyche, as human beings. So in looking at socio-cultural tradition, we look at social constructionism of reality. Are these, social issues that have been presented, do they actually reflect reality? When we talk of cultural, multicultural text, when we read this text, could these experiences depicted by a given author, be could it be a replication or replication of an existing society that have been mentioned in the literary text? Now, we also talk about symbolic interaction. Are these, constructions made about a given society symbolic? If they are, it becomes important that social, psychological, tradition is very valid in exploring a given text. Now, when we look at another tradition, which is called the critical tradition. For literature to thrive, criticism must be taken into consideration. So when we talk about criticism, we are simply trying to look at appreciation of a literary work. Whether we like it or not, literary text must be appreciated. The appreciation of criticism might be positive, it might be negative, but the most important thing is that there must be a critical tradition that will help in interpretation of experiencing within the context of the literary text in relation to the reality or the possibility of experiences that have been depicted. So when we talk of critical tradition, we say that this is suitable for literary criticism. It is concerned with what we call, with how power, oppression, privilege, are the products of certain, forms of communication. That is to say, we cannot talk of communication without talking about power structure, with how power structure controls, communication. We can't talk about communication without talking about oppression, because all these that is within the privileged cycles of a society. So when we talk about this, we more definitely link them to approaches. That's why we have theories in relation to critical stance, in relation to feminism, postmodern works, post-colonial discourses, and the impact they actually have in communication. So when we talk of power structures, power structures actually, they exist within all cultural milieux, social strata of the community. So when we talk of, we should be able to look at critical condition in relation to communication theories and fuse them in the actions of the characters. So when we fuse these, some of these concerned products of critical tradition, we are able to see, in terms of power structure, Karl Marx of Friedrich Engels, Marxism, we're able to delve into another theory, what we call the queer theory. We still look at behavioral aspects that are very important in affecting the content of the work, as well as the psyche or the behavior of the readers. Now, we look at a very important aspect of the critical tradition. In looking at a critical tradition, we look at some negative characteristics exhibited within literature by fictional characters. That's why we are able to look at such queer characters, that is very contemporary, the other gender, the other gender and lesbians, gay, and other different perspectives. Now, there are different, in literature, there are different theories that must be used It depends on the choice of the speaker. It depends on the choice of the researcher. So you can, because literature affects behavior as well as the psyche of those who read the works, and because readers are passive recipients of the experiences an author had documented, it becomes important that they understand how communication theory, the type of theory that would help them to see what these characters actually went through in relation to their own real experiences. So in literature, we should be open to using using the trait theory. We look at a given character's behavior or traits in terms of the character being so argumentative about life, looking at the character's social and communicative anxiety in relation to the experiences of the character. Then we look at cognitive and information processing of the character. And that is why in most traumatic novels, we are able to see the levels of trauma as a result of experiences. We see the level of neuroses, multiple personality disorder as a result of consistent traumatic events, which is also applicable in reality. We also see some perspectives of cultural oppressions, which could also lead to neuroses, multiple personality disorder, because once there is a kind of suppression or sublimation, it affects the actual psyche or behavior of a given. Now, you can also use what I call attribution theory, and we can also use social judgment theory, whereby the readers could actually offer a given social give judgment or interpret a given situation based on the social observances or acceptance of a given cultural, a given experience or given experiences. Now, you can also try looking at information integration theory, which centers on the way individuals organize information, about objects or experiences in relation to literary pieces. Now, I'm going to wrap up this talk by looking at some of the prospects of communication theory. Snap in a very concise manner, I would say that theories of communication, encourage social relations between individuals and groups with a social problems. It also tries to explore the relationship between media communication and political relationship. It also helps to enhance what we call the semiological character of communication. We have diverse forms that could help us to understand human emotions, human behaviors. It also explores what I call the linguistic character of communication. Having said this, we should be able to understand that literature enhances, through theories of communication, enhances cooperation between author and reader. It is actually informational that gives access to the flow of different forms of interpretation. It is also very formative in the sense that it helps to shape our behavior and our psyche as individuals. As we read literary works, we gain different perspectives and we're trying to understand these perspectives in relation to our own experiences. He said literary communications, theories of communication, are also very persuasive. They help us to delve into research and to further understand how these behavioral or cognitive stances, actually function within a given text. Now, it is also a source of motivation in the sense that it motivates the readers in exploring the literary world. And that is to say that it gives us the ability to to be in what we call psychological motion, to travel widely within ourselves through reading. Then it helps in understanding our emotional expression, from the emotional expression of the reader to the personal interpretation, emotional expression of the reader. Based on this, I'll say thank you so much for listening. I remain blessed. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for clearly detailing on the traditions of communication. Can you hear us, ma'am?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for clearly detailing on the traditions of communication. It is indeed honey to your ears.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you. Can you hear us, ma'am?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Tilaga, ma'am.
Ma'am, we can hear you, ma'am.
Yeah,
We can
I've
hear
come
you,
to the
ma'am.
end of this lecture.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for clearly detailing on the traditions of communication.
Can you hear
Yes,
me?
indeed. Yes.
Ma'am, we can hear you,
Hello?
ma'am.
Asha, ma'am, unmute yourself, ma'am.
Hello?
Ma'am, now I am already unmuted only, ma'am.
Asha ma'am's voice I can hear, no issue. That.
Ma'am, shall I proceed, ma'am?
Yeah, go ahead, Asha.
Hello?
I think ma'am is having some audio issues, ma'am.
Ifoma,
He
ma'am?
couldn't hear us.
Ifoma, ma'am?
Ifoma, ma'am, can you hear us, ma'am?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Ifoma, ma'am. Ma'am, can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, ma'am.
Yes, we are able to hear you, ma'am.
Sir, I think ma'am is having some audio.
Yeah.
He couldn't, sorry, ma'am
That is
couldn't
the
hear
end
us.
of my lecture.
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Yeah.
You're
If you
audible.
can hear me, I'm done with the lecture.
Okay. Yes, Asha, continue.
Hello?
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am, for clearly detailing on the traditions of communication.
I am done with the
honey to your
lecture.
ears.
Yeah. I
Gratitude
can't
is the
actually hear
fairest
any sound from
blossom.
you, if you can hear me.
Sir, shall I proceed, sir?
Yes, Asha, you can go ahead.
Okay, sir. Gratitude is the fairest blossom which springs from the soul. Every celebration is an experience. The external fades away and the internal lingers.
Okay.
We are reminded that conferences like this one are milestones on the journey of life and reminders of God's fidelity all through. As we come to the close of our valedictory ceremony, I invite Dr. G. Emmanuel, Assistant Professor, Department of EFL, to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Asha. Good morning, good afternoon, and good day to one and all present here. I feel privilege and honor to have asked to propose vote of thanks on this memorable occasion, the validity function of 3-day virtual international conference. At the outset, I would like to thank the Almighty God for providing all means and help in making today's occasion and the conference a resounding one. First and foremost, I would like to submit my gratitude to the chief guest of the valedictory function, Dr. Ifoma Ezin Odini, Senior Lecturer, Department of English, Language and Literature, Faculty of Arts, Namdi Azikiwe University, Accra. Ma'am, your presence today amidst us has created a remarkable imprint in our minds. I thank you profusely for taking your time to be with us in midst of your busy endeavors and for delivering a wonderful valedictory address. Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to express my sincere thanks to our Guest of honor, Mr. Abhilash Kaushik, General Secretary, All India Forum for English Students, Scholars and Trainers. He is a multi-talented personality with social recognition and consciousness. Sir, I thank you for joining us this afternoon and for delivering a special utterance at this validatory function. And we are indeed elated by the great support that IFEST has rendered us in carrying through this conference. Thank you so much, sir. I'm pleased to express my thanks to the management committee, members of SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Ramapuram, our chairman, co-chairman, chief director, and the director sir for the constant motivation and support in making us reach various heights to fathom the other sides of our lives. It is my pleasure and sincere conviction to thank our dean, Dr. A. Sundar, who was and is a role model of truth, sincerity, affection, hard work, and optimism. His presence and blessings are very real and turns all dismals into bright chances of exploration and learning. His guidance and support takes us through tough times and makes us realize new victories day by day. Sir, my heartfelt thanks to you, sir, for being with us, for moving with us, and for cherishing our presence with you. Thank you, sir. I thank our vice principals, Dr. J. Dileepan and Dr. N. Asokan, who have been a constant support in all our endeavors we take and accomplish. Their presence today has made us the day remarkable in all the events that we conduct on part of the Department of English and other foreign languages. Thank you so much, sir. A leader is a person who finds the way, makes the way, and shows the way. A leader never looks back, but never looks forward to keep promises for future glory. She is none other than our head of the department, Dr. V. Rema, who has been the strong pillar of support at all times. I submit my thanks to her. I thank all the aides of the department for the constant support to our department in all that we do. The faculty members, the students of this department are the links in the chain that makes great giant wheels to move. If the link is weak, the wheel goes to an eternal halt. The faculty members and the students of our department were instrumental in making this wheel called International Conference roll. I thank all the faculty members and my dear students who sincerely and selflessly work for the success of this conference. I profusely thank all the participants in the capacity of research scholars, academicians, and industrialists for all your interest and patience in bearing certain delays, extension of time specified, and replies awaited. Thank you so much for bearing with us. There might have been some inconvenience, yet your presence made things convenient in successfully completing this international conference. I thank each and every individual who were responsible in making each and every aspect beautiful and nice. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you so much, sir. The efforts you have taken are the reason behind the success of the conference. Thank you, sir. Let us all raise for the national anthem. Dear participants, we look forward to see you in another great evening. Wishes from the Department of EFL. Stay safe.
Thank you.